Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest. His name is Alex Newman. If you're watching this on my three returned YouTube channels, or Rockfin, X, or Rumble, you will see his website, Liberty Sentinel. And I'll put a link to his website, Liberty Sentinel with an S, SENTINEL.org. And he is, I've seen him on many different shows. I'll watch some of his shows on the subject we're going to talk about today, which is this climate change UN event that happened in Brazil. But I've seen him on other shows. He's been around. I'm interested in what he talks about. He is an award winning international journalist, educator, author, speaker, nationally syndicated radio host, and consultant. His commitment to glorifying God is evident in all his endeavors. He serves as the senior editor of The New American and is the author of Indoctrinating Our Children to Death and Deep State, The Invisible Government Behind the Scenes, both books I should read. Additionally, he co-authored Crimes of the Educators with Dr. Sam Blumenfeld. For 12 years, Alex taught advanced economics to high school seniors at Freedom Project Academy, an accredited K-12 school offering a classical education based on Judeo-Christian values, and now sits on his board of directors. He's also the president of Liberty Sentinel. That's what I just mentioned. In addition to that, he contributes to the Epoch Times, WorldNet Daily, and other publications. He has a degree in journalism from the University of Florida and emphasizes economics and international relations. And he's also involved in advocacy, serving as director for Bear Witness Central and Red Pill University. But again, his name is Alex Newman, and we're going to talk about this event that happened recently. If you're seeing this, I'll bring up the website. It's the COP30 Brazil, which is this international UN sponsored in, I think, Belém, Brazil, which is northern Brazil. But he can talk more about that. He was on site. So Alex Newman, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
For people who haven't heard your name, I was listening to you today in some of your other shows. You're on Glenn Beck and some of these other Christian-oriented podcasts. Maybe you can talk about your background, add in any additional information other than what I mentioned in your bio, and then lead up to your interest in this climate change. I call it a hoax, but you can call it what you want, and then lead up to COP30 Brazil, Amazonia, please.
Sure. So I'm a homeschool dad of 6. I've been in journalism pretty much my entire adult career. And I think one of the most important stories happening anywhere in the world right now is the climate fraud. Americans don't realize how important it is because the fake media has just stopped talking about it. And I think the reason they've done that is they realize Americans aren't buying it and they're not going to be buying it. So they figure the silent policy will be more effective for their agenda. But ultimately, this is the pretext that the United Nations is using to steal our freedom, undermine national sovereignty, repaganize the world, undermine what's left of the free market, smash the middle class in the West, redistribute economic power and production from the Western world, what we used to call the free world or Christendom, to communist China and its allies. And it's a critical story. It's happening every year. So I've been going to these climate summits for 15 years now. And I go not because I like to hang out with the UN. In fact, there's very few things I like less than hanging out with the UN. I go because this is a critical story. Almost nobody is talking about it. And yet, again, it is the pretext. It is the justification for building this one world totalitarian political, economic, and religious system that they're imposing on us, and that they intend to impose on our children and grandchildren. So somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to ask the questions. Somebody's got to take the pictures and bring back the information that the fake media is trying to hide. And so that's how I got involved in this particular issue.
So you've traveled to all these different sites. So it's this international push, like all these different places for this. It used to be we were freezing over, and now it's just climate change. Like, I'm old enough to remember when they said that the earth was going to freeze over. Like, now it's going to heat over. But they've consistently brought out this thing for almost over generations now, 2 generations maybe. Maybe you can tell you what it's like to travel to all these 15 different meetings about climate change. I mean, it's got to be something else. Like, you were talking about this like demon creature statue too. Like, I'm interested in kind of the occult aspects of it too.
Yeah, the occult aspects are critically important. In fact, I don't think you can understand what's happening with this climate process unless you understand the spiritual side of it. So happy to talk about that. I've been overseas almost all my life. We left America when I was 4. I grew up mostly in the third world, Latin America. Then we went to Europe, and then I was in Africa, and then back to Europe, and now back in the United States, which is fun, but I'm still traveling all over the place. when I was a kid, we were traveling mostly with Dad's work, and now I do it mostly for my own work. But these things are so important. And you mentioned the spiritual aspect of it. The demon statue, I think, was a perfect representation of this. I know you've got a video of it. It's probably one of ours. Unfortunately, the fake media, after they realized how unpopular this would be, was missing in action. But this is the official guardian spirit of the UN COP30, the 30th Conference of the Parties. The Communist Chinese Party donated it. They said it was a fusion of the Chinese dragon spirit with the Brazilian jaguar spirit coming together to form this freakish entity. You see the nice devil horns on there. If you're watching us, you see the fangs, and you see the whole world held in the hands of this horrific creature with the doves fluttering away as, dove, the symbol of peace, like, get me out of here. So, very, very clear symbolism here. They're not leaving much to the imagination. But I've observed this trend really going back to the beginning. So the first climate summit I went to was 2019. That was in Copenhagen in Denmark, 2009. And the Chinese Communist Party, one of my most vivid memories of that climate conference was the Chinese Communist Party had their display, and they had come up with this formula. And I don't remember exactly the numbers, but they said, because of our one-child policy, which is ruthlessly enforced with forced abortions, all kinds of terrible things. They figured that each one of those children that was not born as a result of their policies would have emitted X amount of CO2. And I don't remember what it was. And so they said, look, we're, climate superheroes, right? If all these children had been born, then there would have been this much CO2 in the atmosphere that's not there now. And I'm thinking to myself, what a bunch of psychopaths. Like they're bragging about one of the most barbaric policies of the modern era. And talking about this like it's good for the climate. So, that was my first clue that something was really fishy here. The next year, they hold it in Cancun. And the head of this circus, her name at the time was Cristiana Figueres. She was the executive secretary of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. She still haunts these summits, but she's no longer officially in charge. She opens up the summit, the entire summit, right, with the opening ceremony. She starts it off with a prayer to Ixchel, whom she described as the Mayan goddess of tapestries and creativity. And she, I forget her exact words, but something like, "Dear Ixchel, please help us weave a creative tapestry of solutions to this terrible climate crisis." So I whip out my laptop, obviously, and who is this Ixchel? And it literally took half a second to figure out that Ixchel was the Mayan goddess of cannibalism and war and human sacrifice. So I thought, very appropriate to open up this disgusting summit with a prayer to a demon associated with human sacrifice and war and cannibalism. And it's only gotten more extreme since. I could give you endless examples. A couple of years after that, I was in Rio for the UN Summit on Sustainable Development. They lit up the big Christ statue in green. A few years after that, the head of the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, a pagan named Rajendra Pachauri, he got caught sexually abusing and molesting women. And so in his resignation letter, he actually lays it all out. He says, this isn't just my mission, saving the earth and the environment, or whatever. He says, it's my religion and it's my dharma, which is a pagan Hindu term. A couple years after that, this is when it became really real. We went to Egypt, I believe it was 2022. This must have been the COP27, if I'm not mistaken. And right before showing up at the UN summit, the UN releases this document. It's on human development. And they argue in very clear English that the system of morality and ethics that they say evolved with humanity over thousands of years is no longer adequate to the task of saving Mother Earth. And of course, they're talking about the Mosaic Law, the Christian ethic, the Christian moral code. And they argue, in, again, plain English, that we need people to act according to new moral codes. And so I get off the airplane. I fly from Cairo to Sharm el-Sheikh on the Sinai Peninsula where the summit is taking place. And the first thing that greets me is a big placard put up by the UN. And it's got quotes from a pagan Egyptian document, supposedly 4,000 years old. And it's about why Maat, some pagan Egyptian deity, should allow us into the afterlife. And the reason why we should be allowed into the afterlife, according to the document, is that we have not polluted the earth or the water. So here we see a clear effort to redefine sin, right? Your sin is not your idolatry, your murder, your theft, your covetousness, your hatred. No, your real sin is your carbon footprint. It's your carbon emissions, right? You did damage to Mother Earth. So it's becoming real at this thing. And then a few days after that, you have this weird ceremony, and they wouldn't let us come up for it. The Egyptian government said security reasons, we can only have X number of kooks going up to Mount Sinai. But they had all these so-called religious leaders of the world. They marched up to the top of Mount Sinai, and first they did a climate repentance ceremony, which I imagine is something like what the prophets of Baal were doing on top of Mount Carmel, for those who remember the biblical story. And then they whip out a new and supposedly improved 10 Commandments. They've got these green tablets with the new and improved 10 Commandments. And the guy who's masterminding this gives this little speech about how governments need to do more to tackle the climate crisis. And he smashes the tablets, throwback to Moses after the law, the 10 Commandments were delivered to him on top of Mount Sinai by God himself. And I go down the mountain and I'm able to interview the ringleaders of this the very next day. One of them, James Sternlich, he's the CEO of the Peace Department. He says to me on camera, we have the footage. He says, yeah, not only do we have, the new and improved 10 Commandments, now we're working also on the third covenant, whereby we are going to build the kingdom of heaven here on earth. And so, people just think about this for a minute, right? You've got God giving us the original 10 Commandments. The UN and Friends gives us the new and improved 10 Commandments. You've got God giving us the old covenant and the new covenant. Then you've got the UN and Friends coming in with a third covenant. And at this latest one, and there's, many other examples I could give, but I'm trying to just give an abbreviated timeline here of what I've seen. At this latest one, not only do they have the big demon spirit, but they have the highest proportion of what they call indigenous peoples ever to attend one of these summits. Everywhere you go, you've got the Indians. You see them right there, right? If you're watching us, you see the Indians with the headdresses, and all over the place. They're starting all these events with prayers to the river spirits and the forest spirits, and what they're doing here, and it's becoming, beyond blatant. They don't even hide it anymore. They're working toward the repaganization of the world. And some of them will tell you explicitly that Christianity is the problem. Christianity is the reason that Mother Earth is in so much pain. I talked to a bunch of them on camera who said this. And this goes back to an argument made by Professor Lynn White back in the 1960s. He was a professor at Princeton, Stanford, UCLA. And he argued in very clear terms that Christianity is the reason for the ecological crisis that humanity is dealing with today. He says Christianity is an anthropocentric religion because Christians believe that God made man in his own image, that God put the planet here for our benefit and his glory. In other words, he gave us dominion over the earth. He gave us dominion over the animals and the trees and the fish of the sea, and told us to steward it and to use it and to tame it. And that is unacceptable, according to the climate cultists. They believe that that is the reason why we have all these environmental problems. And so the solution then is to repaganize the world. And so in all over this UN summit, you've got these Indians, some of whom are not even real Indians. They just, they have darker skin, so they put some war paint on them and some feathers, and they act like they're, some kind of guy that they just plucked out of the rainforest. Some of them genuinely were, tribal people who live out in the jungle. And over and over again, the same refrain. Mother Earth is mad at us. Father Sky is mad at us. We have to take immediate steps to defend Mother Earth, and we have to placate these angry deities that are upset about our carbon emissions. So what we're watching here is the repaganization of the world under the guise of this pseudoscientific hypothesis that human emissions of CO2 are causing climate change. So it is a pagan, demonic agenda. It's very, very clear for anybody with a Christian worldview with a basic understanding of the Bible that this is all straight from the pit of hell, and yet nobody is really talking about this.
It's incredible. It should be on the discussion of every Christian church. Like, this is, like, you just laid it out so clearly in the opening, like freedom, repaganization, redistribution of wealth, kind of communism. There's so many things they're using climate change as an excuse. And you talked, I think in this other talk I was listening to, even at this one in 2025, there's wealth redistribution from first world to third world countries too, right?
Absolutely. And it's really a deceptive kind of wealth redistribution, because I think a lot of people just assume that, this is taking money from the rich in America, the millionaires and the billionaires, and giving it to poor, starving Africans. Total baloney, right? The real billionaires, they hide their money in tax-exempt foundations and other ways to avoid the tax man. They're extorting what's left of the middle class in the Western world to redistribute that wealth to the kleptocrats who have enslaved and impoverished the third world, right? They're not giving this money to the hungry African who's trying to herd his goats. They're giving this money to the dictators and the kleptocrats who are keeping these people in poverty under the guise of climate change solutions and this kind of nonsense. It's really grotesque. It's not wealth redistribution in the traditional sense that people associate with Marxism, where you allegedly take from the rich and give to the poor. Here we're taking from the poor in what's left of the West and the middle class and redistributing it to the rich of the third world hellholes that are playing along with this disgusting agenda.
One of the interesting things about this climate change is this psyop element of it, where they're just telling you like the world is coming to an end, and you've got Al Gore and all these other characters just scaring the living daylights out of the kids. Like, I know it's a scam. Like, I'm old. My kids are in college. They believe it. Like, they're really hit. They're also hit with the repaganization too. So it's not just the UN, but even through the curriculum of the West or the state schools, they talk about repay indigenous land, indigenous people. Christianity is the problem. So it's not just it's centered to UN, but how the constant psychological operation against people is really an interesting component of it all. Would you agree with that?
There's no question. I mean, the whole thing is a psyop, and I've got to give credit to the evildoers. It was a clever scam, right? Try to convince people that the gas they exhale is toxic pollution, and try to make them pay a tax as if that's going to make the weather better in 100 years. It was a clever scam. It was a good attempt. And it's clever for multiple reasons, right? I mean, the first is that, as they themselves say, every time you turn toward them, this is a global problem which requires a global solution. There's no government that can tackle this on its own. It must be through the United Nations. So in that sense, it's very clever, right? The emissions don't respect national borders, so we need a global solution. The other one is that it gives them the ability, if they can convince people of this foolishness, to control and regulate and tax literally every single human activity. There is nothing you do, including, again, I'll mention breathing, that doesn't release CO2 into the atmosphere. Of course, it's the gas of life. There's nothing wrong with CO2. In fact, the Earth is currently starving for more CO2. Human emissions make up a fraction of 1% of all the greenhouse gases naturally in the atmosphere. But from a totalitarian perspective, if you can convince people that CO2 is bad and that everything that produces CO2 needs to be regulated or controlled, you own them. I mean, there's no area of their life that then is not subject to your efforts to save the climate. And it's even more insidious than that. If you look at the goal that they themselves have established, you've probably heard them talking about net zero, right? Yes. Well, what does that mean? No more carbon dioxide emissions. Well, the average person exhales about 2 pounds of CO2 every day. So you literally can never achieve net zero unless you exterminate all the people on the planet. And then you still can't get net zero because as their bodies decompose, they're going to be releasing carbon dioxide out into the planet. And so this is an unwinnable fight. It's not like World War II where, you beat the Nazis and then we can all go back to our lives. This is a perpetual scam that you can keep milking and milking and milking forever because there's no way to win it unless you kill all the people. And so there's the old cliche, the old joke, that once you figure out the carbon they want to reduce is you, then it all makes sense. But it's true, right? This is a brilliant scam from their perspective. The problem is people were still clever enough, at least in the United States. This isn't true in all places, but in the United States, they've done the polling. They know most Americans don't even believe that human emissions are causing climate change. Even among the people who do believe, which is an increasingly small and deranged minority, they don't care enough to do anything. There was a poll by AP NORC, Center for Public Affairs Research, just came out, I think, last year. Less than 1 in 3 Americans is willing to pay a single dollar on their electric bill each month to fight global warming. So even among the people drinking the Kool-Aid, people just don't care. So now they basically have maintained a policy of just keeping quiet about it, right? Almost no coverage of the climate summit in the American media, even though there's these huge developments, almost not a peep from the media. But really their strategy is quite clever. And they outlined it at this summit. They outlined it at every summit. We're going to brainwash your children, right? So UNESCO, the UN Education Agency, had a big event. They came together with the OECD, which does the PISA test, the International Standardized Academic Test. They came together with the Marxist Brazilian Department of Education or Ministry of Education. And they all agreed The key to the climate change hoax is to brainwash the next generation, to capture the hearts and minds of the children. And they said climate literacy needs to be mandated in every country, which climate literacy means climate propaganda. They said we're going to measure and test how effective governments are in imposing this by adding it to the international standardized academic tests, the PISA that OECD runs. And so they're moving very rapidly now to brainwash the next generation. And so even while Americans are, not thinking about climate change, they're focused on the football game, they're focused on, Trump or Democrats or whatever, the fight between Erica Kirk and Candace Owens, they are quietly working away in classrooms all across this country at taxpayer expense to terrorize your children into believing that the gas they exhale is a dangerous toxic pollution. But if they pay enough taxes to the UN, then the weather will maybe be nicer in 100 years.
Right. No, it's amazing. They've done it. I think that what you said makes perfect sense because I've seen my kids, like, they really believe it. Like, oh, I'm not going to have anything because we're going to be underwater in 30 years. I'm like, that's what they told me when I was your age. They said the same thing. But it is that now that you say that, it just makes me think how even more sinister the UN is in my thing. Like, I know what the monolith is, the shape of that building. And I've done shows on the Lucis Trust. And the meditation room that William Cooper talked about, if you want to go real paranoia. But like, there's a lot of, and the Rockefellers, the foundation of the UN. Did you see any monoliths or anything like that? I mean, or Lucis Trust? Or I know that it goes up the pyramid to the top of the UN, right? I mean, this is the UNESCO is kind of downflowing, or this climate change, these groups and things like that, whatever this one was called, COP30. But there's so many tendrils of the UN. This is just one of the many kind of tentacles.
Oh, absolutely. And I would argue that UNESCO is probably one of the most important ones, again, because they recognize that brainwashing the next generation is the key. But to bring it back to the Lucis Trust for just a moment, before we get into some of the other agencies involved, UNESCO has what they call the World Core Curriculum. Now, this is a global education system developed by Robert Mueller, the Assistant Secretary General of the UN. He's often called the father of global education. And in the foreword to he said this should be taught to every child in every country, in every school around the world. And in the foreword to the teacher's manual, he makes a stunning admission. He says that the philosophy that underpins this all comes from the works of Alice Bailey and the Jabal Kul, which is the name that Alice Bailey gave to the demonic entity. She called it an ascended master that she claimed to be channeling for these books. There you have the World Core Curriculum. This is right on the U.S. Department of Education's website, by the way. And this connects directly to what's happening in the classroom right now. People don't realize this. Bill Gates of Hell in 2004 went to UNESCO headquarters in Paris and signed an agreement with them where they promised they were going to globalize education standards, curricula, teacher training, even the technology to implement it all. And he came back to the United States and almost immediately started pouring millions and then billions of dollars into this abomination we know today as Common Core, which, thanks to Barack Obama and the Republicans in Congress, is now essentially taught in every one of the 50 states in almost every government school. About half of all Catholic dioceses now use this in their Catholic schools. A lot of Protestant schools also have jumped on this bandwagon. So it is very, very real. And the Lucis Trust used to be called Lucifer Publishing Company. I think it was a little too obvious. They had to rebrand that because Lucifer Publishing, really. But that's the heart of this matter. I mean, when I say this is demonic and from the pit of hell, I mean that in the most literal sense possible. People think I'm just, being flamboyant. I'm not. This is a satanic agenda. And I mean, this should be obvious, right? We know the whole thing's based on lies. Who's the father of lies? I mean, that's Satan, of course. So that should be really clear. But to your point, yes, there's a lot of UN agencies involved in this. Earlier this year, the International Maritime Organization, I guarantee you not 1 in 1,000 Americans knows anything about the UN agency called the International Maritime Organization. They approved the first ever direct global tax on humanity. They said all international shipping must be taxed. The emissions will be taxed. The money will be paid directly to the United Nations. Now, why is this important? Well, first of all, the UN has never had taxing authority, right? If the UN wanted money, they had to ask member states to give it to them. Under this proposal, which was approved, by the way, they were going to develop their own revenue source. And they were asked, their own estimates said they're going to bring in hundreds of billions of dollars a year with this. And now, just to show people how significant this is, they themselves estimated that shipping accounted for 3% of all global emissions, okay? If the UN can tax shipping because it's 3% of global emissions, what are they going to do with agriculture and transportation and energy and manufacturing? They're going to try to tax everything. And once the precedent is set, there will be no stopping these fools. Thankfully, Donald Trump told them to kick rocks and said, if you try to implement this, not only are we not going to pay it, but we're going to sanction you people. And so Donald Trump, I think, has been able to kick the can down the road for maybe 3 years, hopefully. But they are not done yet. Also, earlier this year, very few people realized this because, again, the American fake media is not covering it for strategic purposes. The International Court of Justice, which likes to portray itself as like the world Supreme Court, they made a ruling where they said every government has an obligation under international law and under international human rights law to vigorously combat the climate crisis, to vigorously restrict carbon dioxide emissions. And they said any leader that doesn't do this is committing what they called an intentionally wrongful act. And I probably don't need to tell you, but you could be prosecuted for an intentionally wrongful act. And because they said you have a human right to a nice climate, not doing what they say is a violation of human rights. And so you're in the same category then as genocidal mass murderers, et cetera, et cetera. These people are dead serious, folks. And, you know, they're not going to get this next year, right? They're not going to drag Donald Trump before their kangaroo court next year. But give it another 10 years. Give it another 20 years. They have laid the groundwork here to absolutely take down freedom and sovereignty around the world, and ultimately to bring in people like Donald Trump on criminal charges at the international level. And lest you think that's ridiculous, ladies and gentlemen, they're already doing it, right? And I can give you one recent example just from this year. Rodrigo Duterte was the president of the Philippines, and I never paid much attention to him. I wrote one article. I went back into my archives. I did one article on him. And that was when he was saying the UN is a joke and we should withdraw. Well, right now, he is sitting in a jail cell in The Hague, awaiting trial by the UN kangaroo court. Right there he is right there, Rodrigo Duterte. And so these people aren't messing around. If they can bring in the former president of the Philippines, they can absolutely bring in Donald Trump if and when the political climate allows that. And for those saying, well, the United States is not part of the Rome Statute, which created the International Criminal Court. Yeah, neither is Benjamin Netanyahu, and they're after him. So watch out, folks. These people are dead serious.
Wow, so he's in court at The Hague right now?
Yes.
Duterte is? Wow, I didn't know that.
Yep, he is awaiting prosecution. He's sitting in a jail cell right this moment. And again, the only time he ever came on my radar was when he said the UN is a joke, we should withdraw. So I wonder if that rubbed somebody the wrong way.
Right. I mean, this is getting scary. It's really incredible, like the power and potency of the UN. Yep. And its impact on all the nations of the world. And this climate change is just one aspect. That's what's really scary, is all these tentacles. The International Court of Justice is one. This climate change, there's other things. So you're saying, when you said our Common Core is based on the Common Curriculum Core from the UN, is that correct? So
the background here is Bill Gates of hell. Bill Gates, the Microsoft founder, went to UNESCO headquarters in 2004, and he signed an agreement. You can actually get a copy of this agreement. My friend Phyllis Schlafly, who passed away some years ago, was able to get a copy of this agreement and posted it on the internet. Bill Gates signed a deal with UNESCO, the UN's education agency, to globalize all education. They agreed they were going to create global education standards, global curricula, global teacher training programs. And then Bill Gates came back and started pouring huge amounts of money into Common Core. And by the way, William, I actually have advertisements that the Common Core people bought to promote Common Core, where they tell you Common Core aligns with the international standards that are being used all over the world. So they're not messing around, right? Again, the education, so-called, of your children is the key to this agenda. You know, we're the bitter clingers, right? Barack Obama is they're clinging to their guns and their Bibles. You know, there's no way we're going to ever get them on board. They don't care about that anymore. They know it's just a waiting game. We've got 80% of American children in these brainwash camps. Even if we only capture the hearts and minds of 80% of those, we've got this. They're done for. It's just a waiting game right now.
Wow, that's incredible. So it's not just Bill Gates with the kind of medical tyranny; it's the educational tyranny. I mean, who knows what else they're doing? Food tyranny. It's just tyranny through all these foundations. And UNESCO was Julian Huxley.
That's right.
Aldous Huxley,
eugenicist and a humanist. Yep, that's exactly right.
The depopulation, that's one of the aspects of climate change. So it justifies lessening of depopulation, lessening of the initial commandment of God, which is be fruitful and multiply, right? It's like literally Antichrist.
Man, I'm so glad you mentioned that. I actually have the UN's Agenda 21 for Children book. I don't think it's within reach right now, but I bought a copy. And so this is an official UN publication that they use for Agenda 21. That's the UN's agenda for the 21st century, to introduce it to children. And there's literally a page in there where there's all these storks delivering, tons of babies, and the cities are on fire. These Hindu deities are sitting up on the clouds, like with this horrified look on their face. And on the page adjacent to it, it explains what's going on. It says, Mother Earth groans every time it registers another birth. And so I tell people the simple formula, if you want to understand the UN agenda, is just take everything God teaches in his word, in the Bible, flip it upside down, starting with the very first commandment, be fruitful, multiply, and no, children are bad for the climate. Children are hurting Mother Earth. You don't want to have any of those pesky things, and going all the way through, right? God said, thou shalt not steal. They're very open about the fact that they want to redistribute your wealth, which is another way of saying steal your wealth. God says, thou shalt not murder. They say you have a human right to murder your babies, and all kinds of stuff. It is diabolical to the core, and there's no other way to understand it.
Yeah, it's really evil. Really, really evil. It really is a shadow over humanity. The UN's a terrible organization.
Yes, it is.
And it should be resisted on all fronts, mentally, spiritually, physically, really. I mean, you got to really watch out, but it really is incredible. I've done shows on Alice Bailey, but it goes all the way up. There was like great spiritual communions of this year, and 2025, there was, I forgot what the name of it, thank God, what it was, but there was something through the UN where like there were great meditation and the golden age, and some of this stuff is really out there, guys. It's not a phantasm. It's really real. They're implementing this, so be very careful. Alex, I know that you got to run. Is there anything you'd like to add, or anything I missed, or how can we wrap this up, and where can people find you?
Yeah, well, thank you, William. I appreciate it. I would just urge people to get informed on this issue. Don't take my word. Every single claim I made today that you're saying, wow, that can't be, look it up and see if I'm telling the truth. And once you see that I am telling the truth, get involved somehow. You can sign up for our free newsletter. It's at libertysentinel.org. If you're watching, you can see it right there, libertysentinel.org. You can sign up for our free daily headlines at thenewamerican.com. If you're not signed up yet for the print publication, I encourage people to do that. It comes out once a month, and the algorithms and the Google can't silence that. You can give it to your neighbor or your police chief or your city councilman. Also, get involved on the education front. I tell people that is the most important battlefront here. If they get the hearts and minds of the next generation, it's all over. So, what me and my family have done, we homeschool. We use a great program called Classical Conversations. I would encourage people to check that out. But there are many, many good programs. Whatever you do, find a way to make sure your children get a good education. My latest book deals with this, Indoctrinating Our Children to Death, Government Schools, War on Faith, Family, and Freedom. So this has been the plan from the beginning. It's a feature, not a bug. And folks, we've got to get involved somehow. And that begins, again, with your own family, with your own children. And then you work outward from there. It starts with getting informed. And thank you very much for having me on the program, William. If people want to follow me on X, it's just AlexNewman_JOU. But check out all those resources I mentioned, and I hope we can talk again soon.
Yeah, I'd like to invite you back, talk about your books. I am going to lift from you the statement United Abominations, because I wrote a book called Abomination too, but it seems absolutely fitting. I'm going to use that, and I'll mention your name, though. Again, it's Alex Newman. His website is The New American, and also Liberty Sentinel. So Liberty, SENTINEL.org. I'll put 2 links there. Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
God bless you. Stay there.